This has huge implications for the Spurs, and no, it doesn't come from within the Spurs org itself. It comes from within the Bulls organization, as the Spurs have their draft pick for 2025, but it's top 10 protected. And this has some big implications for whether the Spurs can add a player via the draft or via trade to pair with Wemby, our boy. We got to get into that and some of the possibilities and what the NBA odds say, or the Spurs odds for landing that pick. Plus, an article tweeted by a Spurs insider today left some people a little bit confused, so we're going to get into all of that coming up on this episode of Spurs Digest. But before we get into the video, guys, I want you to hit that subscribe button down below. We're over 500 subscribers before the season starts, and 95% of you guys watching have not hit that button. So if you want to help support us here at Spurs Digest, daily Spurs news, rumors, reports, all that good stuff, hit the button down below. We're going to get straight into the video, and I want to start with this. Now, this is very interesting. So, there's not a ton of news right now in Spurs land, as you guys probably know. It's that dry time of year, right? We know training camps are going to pick up in the next little bit. We're going to get some preseason. There's a lot of good stuff coming, but right now there's not a ton. But I wanted to go into something that I saw on Twitter today, and it kind of took me by surprise. So it was Jeff Garcia from Spurs Zone, of course, and he tweeted this out. Lamarcus Aldridge open to joining Spurs coaching staff, training Wembanyama. And you can see the timestamp is August 22nd, 2024. So I saw this a couple days ago. I didn't think too much of it, but I went back to read the article today. But this is an article from a year ago, which really intrigued me, because this article was originally written September 14th, 2023, and he wasn't replying to anyone specifically. So what could this mean? So I wanted to dive into this a little bit. I don't know if this is a hint. Like, realistically, let's be honest, this is probably nothing. I'm going to bring this back up just so you can see it's probably nothing. But I thought it was really interesting to talk about, and why not revisit this as we're now on the cusp of a new season after seeing Wembanyama for his rookie year already and what he's been able to do. Now, Lamarcus Aldridge was a fantastic Spur. There were definitely some moments that were less than ideal, but hey, at this point, he's done his career. He was a good Spur, and he has some very specific movesets that I think could pay off well for Wembanyama. And if he does, if this retweet does mean something, and he is willing to work with Wemby, Lamarcus Aldridge himself last year also tweeted out saying like he'd be open to come into the Spurs to work in that kind of player development position with Wembanyama. Now, Wemby already has a pretty solid mid-range game, but can you guys remember how lethal Lamarcus was from the mid-range? We've had a lot of nice mid-range snipers throughout Spurs history, but Lamarcus had lots of great post moves as well, had great footwork, and was deadly from the mid-range. And we know Wemby is already good at a lot of that stuff, but I actually think there is a decent bit to be gained from Lamarcus Aldridge training Wembanyama. I don't think he needs to be a full-time, full force kind of guy that manipulates everything left and right. But I think one of those guys that just kind of works with Wemby one-on-one, maybe a couple other guys on the team too, maybe some younger guys. I think it could pay off, because can you imagine Wemby pulling out some Lamarcus post moves? Now, to be fair, he's already doing a bunch of stuff like that. We've seen him have a better than maybe expected post game, although I don't even know if we can. I feel like everything he's doing, we already set him to such a high bar, but everything he does is still better than we expect. Anyway, I know I said the favorite for Depoy. There's some crazy stuff with Wemby. I could talk about that all day, but regardless, to bring this all together, it's very interesting that he retweeted a year-old article. Don't know if it means anything. Maybe I'm looking too far into this, but what do you guys think about Lamarcus Aldridge potentially joining the Spurs and working with Wemby, maybe on some nice little post stuff? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. But we're going to move on to the main point of this video, and I wanted to talk about this. Now, look, the tweet on Twitter that I will show in a second, obviously it tweets on Twitter, where else would it be? But it was on, well, I guess X now, but it reminded me of the Spurs draft situation. I want to give credit to the original person that tweeted this out, Paul Garcia. He said, this upcoming season, the Bulls get to keep their 2025 draft pick if their lottery pick lands in the 1 to 10 range. If the pick lands 11 to 30 in the draft, that pick goes to the Spurs. By over-under wins, the Bulls pick is projected to be a top 10 lottery pick. And well, unfortunately, Spurs fans, it's actually even worse than that, because if you go look, this is from FanDuel, there's a bunch of other websites where you can check the odds, but the Bulls' odds right now, they're not very high. They're at 28.5 wins, and by my count, there was only 4 or maybe 5 teams that had worse odds than that. You're talking the likes of the Nets, the Wizards, the Pistons, right? The Spurs were at like 36.5, which is kind of nice. But this is the thing, right? Now, look, the Spurs right now are in a great spot. Of course, we brought in Chris Paul. We still have some young guys on decent contracts. We'll have Wemby for a long time. We'll have Vassell for a long time. There's a lot of good stuff going on in Spurs land. But as we all know, like, the best way to have long-term success, as we saw with the Warriors, as we even saw with the Spurs themselves, is to have guys outperforming their contract. And the best way to do that now in the NBA especially is to either sign a contract before the cap takes a huge jump like the Warriors, or get incredible production out of your low-tier contracts. And that's something I think the Spurs are aiming to do. But now if we look at the draft in the coming years, the Spurs actually are in a pretty good position because there's no protection from that DeJounte Murray trade. They have that first-round pick from Atlanta. They have that first-round pick on their own. But adding a third first-round pick into this year's draft. Now, Charlotte, they're going to be a lottery team unless they really surprise someone, which I don't really think is going to happen. But if the Spurs can add a third first-round pick, can you imagine the potential? I'm not even just talking about this draft. Like, even if this could land in the lottery, this could land 12 to 14. I'm not going to get into these odds of, like, whether the Bulls could win the lotto, blah, 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 blah. But regardless, this is looking to be a very solid draft by a lot of accounts. There's going to be a lot of really good players available, but it's not just that because, you can have as many prospects as you want, but the more you get, the less playing time they might get, the less contract slots you have left on your team. But what I'm envisioning is, first of all, the Spurs are probably going to make their own pick. I don't know where they're going to end up this year. I don't know where Atlanta's going to end up this year. They're probably going to make at least one pick in this draft for the guy that they want, or maybe they trade up, trade down. They pick a guy. That's kind of the Spurs way, right? You're going to grab a guy. But what I think they're really not afraid to do is to go out there and make a move, whether it's for another future draft pick to just kind of set themselves up for long-term success, or we're getting on that cusp right now of the Spurs being willing to go out there, send off some draft picks, maybe send off some young assets to bring in some good players. We brought in Chris Paul for a reason. Not only is he a great leader, but he's going to help you win more games and establishing that winning culture. I mean, to be fair, that's something we've done all throughout Spurs history, but over the last few years, it definitely hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows when it comes to the standings. But anyway, what I'm saying is we got 2 picks on its own. Adding a third could literally be that difference of adding a third first round pick in a trade, adding a second first round pick in a trade, trading up in the draft, trading down in the draft, getting this pick. If Chicago ends up, let's say, at like 11th or 12th in the draft, could be absolutely huge for the Spurs, and it just opens up endless possibilities. And the thing is, look, Chicago, the reason they're ranked so low right now is because of the moves they've done this offseason. Like, since the offseason started, of course, they acquired Josh Giddey, trading out Alex Caruso. And I think a lot of analytics and a lot of people who are betting are thinking that immediately makes the Bulls a lot worse of a team. And I would tend to agree. I actually think Caruso is much more of a winning style basketball player, but Giddey's one of those guys that can maybe up your floor a little bit, not as much a ceiling raiser, at least not at this point in his career. Of course, they waived Andrew Funk, which is one of the best names in the NBA. Just had to go down that road. But of course, DeRozan's gone now too, gone over to Sacramento, and they got Chris Duarte and draft consideration from the Kings in that whole deal. And of course, the Spurs were involved, with the Harrison Barnes. There's a lot of stuff going on there. But you look at the team, they lost DeRozan. They lost a guy who's still able to be that closer for you. They really didn't add that much. And they lost Caruso too. So ultimately, they don't look great. Of course, the Zach LaVine situation just seems to get crazier and crazier every day. But I think one thing people are sleeping on is it seems like Lonzo Ball is ready to come back this year too. Now, do I think the Bulls are going to be a good team? Do I think they're going to be a fringe playoff team? No, I don't think so. I mean, they kept Patrick Williams around. He's never really stepped up the way they've wanted him to do. But they do still have talent, and maybe the biggest if on this entire roster, if Lonzo Ball manages to come back and play in 60, 70 games, I think they're going to be better than people think. So I'm not saying it's likely. In fact, I think it's very likely that pick never ends up transferring to the Spurs. But I think there's some underlying stuff there that can make this a little more intriguing to follow for Spurs fans as we move forward. So let me know what you think about this down below. Do you think the Spurs will get this Bulls pick? Do you think they'll be better than expected? Or is this all just hopium and I'm just hoping that something happens with the Bulls, they end up being better, so the situation for the Spurs is better in the future? It's probably that. Let's be honest, I am going to be a little bit biased in these videos, but it's fun to talk about a team that's already so great with so many great young players potentially getting even better. And that'll do it for this episode of Spurs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below, guys. We got daily Spurs news. Myself and Keenan, we're going to be with you all season long, and we'd love if you stuck around for the ride. I've been your host, Josh Gosse. I'll catch you in the next one.